So in my conversations with gun advocates and folks who are really doing, on the ground, doing wonderful work for gun control and gun violence prevention, I realize that there's a sense of optimism and there's a wonderful energy around the work that they're doing, and that for me is a takeaway, and I certainly have gleaned from that there is a need for that optimism, but there's also a valid basis for it. One of the statistics that I've heard is that 96% of the litigation that's been out there for gun control and to make sure that we're keeping guns out of the hands of the wrong people, 96% of those cases are successful. And that's something that we don't hear every day. It's something that as advocates are doing the work, they don't necessarily think about all the time, but it's a very important thing to just stop and reflect on as we think about the work. And so that for me is a takeaway, and that is something that I will certainly breathe and take in as I continue to push forward in my work, that there are reasons for optimism and for a positive energy, and that we have to spread that energy in order to continue to do the work and do it well. My second takeaway, another thing that I took away from this panel, was the fact that I think the right has done a very good job at framing the conversation in terms of mental health and the need for mental health treatment, the need for treatment of those folks who might get guns and who have some mental illness. And while that certainly is an issue and something that we should pay attention to, one of the stats that came out of this panel was that 4% of the shootings that we see are done by folks who have some form of mental illness. It is not a non-factor, but as close to a non-factor as we can get. And I think that we have to do an effective job at counteracting the conversation that's been developed on the right about how important mental health is in thinking about gun control, and really stick to what we know, which is that gun control is important for safe communities in order to make sure that we are protecting all of our citizens and all of the people who live here, all of our children, that we really are focusing not on mental health so much and the folks with mental illness who get guns, but really making sure that we are putting in place background checks and other effective policies that will keep guns out of the hands of bad people. I think one of the most important things for me of this panel in my work as a racial justice advocate was in seeing the gun control and gun prevention, gun violence prevention movement as a parallel movement to the racial justice work. And so as we think about racial justice and really getting to a point where people of color are treated as equals, where we have true racial equity in this country, we're looking for parallel movements that have been successful. So we've looked to the LGBTQ movement and the way that the narrative has been framed such that we see commercials and movies and television programs where LGBTQ people are accepted openly. They are part of our conversation, and the needle is moving in terms of acceptance and tolerance and really embracing people who are LGBTQ. The same is happening, I realize, in the gun control movement, and I think I see that as a parallel for the racial justice advocacy community to think about as we frame a conversation about how we embrace people of color and move forward as a nation to make sure that we are eliminating some of the troubling stereotypes and the dangerous perceptions of people of color in this country, really helping to connect with people in the LGBT community, but also with gun control advocates and others so that we can make sure that we are in lockstep in developing our nation movements and really making sure that we are progressing together.